The Oklahoma Sooners got good news at quarterback, got some good news along the offensive line, and maybe they'll get some good news on the defensive line as well. We're going to talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners. Thank you for joining us. Today's episode of Locked On Sooners is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Oklahoma Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. He's Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref in Norman. Josh, how we doing, man?
Doing great. Obviously, the big news of the day in Oklahoma land, they got their quarterback coming back. The news that we've all been waiting on. We thought we were going to get this news with Dillon Gabriel. Frankly, probably wouldn't have gotten the grade back that he wanted from the NFL draft Knicks of the world. So this is the right decision for Dillon Gabriel. It's great news for Oklahoma. And John, I think it's a massive deal here in Norman, Oklahoma, that now, at least the plan going in, right? Obviously, subject to change, and we can address what a couple of those subject to changes would be, but subject to change, you've got your starting quarterback back in Dillon Gabriel, and that gives Jackson Arnold 1 year to season. And I do count me in the camp, John, of I think Dillon Gabriel can be better than what he was for Oklahoma a season ago. So I think it's massive news. I think it's great for Jeff Lebby, for Brent Venables, for everybody that's trying to see this thing improve from 6-7 to Oklahoma getting back to competing for a Big 12 championship. I think Gabriel's the type of quarterback, dime time part 2, baby, can lead you to the Big 12 championship, John.
Yeah, he is a good quarterback. And the other thing that this does for you is it gives you more continuity going into next season. I mean, think about what the Oklahoma Sooners have gone through kind of at quarterback over the last few years. So you go from Jalen Hurts to Spencer Rattler, the 2019 to 2020 transition. Spencer Rattler has a pretty solid first year in Norman, has some games where he struggles, but overall a pretty good year. And then, the 2020 to 2021 season, we get the Caleb Williams hype train coming into town. I mean, things don't go well for Spencer Rattler in some games early on, and the pressure is on for him. And then Caleb Williams comes in, takes over, and then you get, half of the season of Caleb Williams, and he's gone. You get a little bit of quarterback stability now, having 2 straight years with the same starting quarterback. I think it's really good for this team as a whole. They get to build together. I mean, Dillon Gabriel has been with the Sooners for a full year, going to have another full offseason with Jeff Lebby with his wide receivers. Presumably, we think Marvin Mims will go off to the NFL, but it gives him another year to work with Jaleel Farouk. Continue to build that relationship, build that chemistry, and then build it with guys like, further build it with Drake Stoops, further build it with your true freshman guys that are now going to be, I guess they'd be redshirt freshmen in Jaden Gibson and Nicholas Anderson, as well as guys that came in through the transfer portal late last spring in LV Bunkley Shelton and JJ Hester. So I think it's good to have that continuity. Continuity is such a great word when it comes to football. I think it's one of the more underrated things in football. The more that you can keep guys together, the better off you'll be. Look at TCU as a prime example. One of the reasons that they're playing so well this year in Sonny Dykes' first season in Fort Worth is because they've had a ton of continuity. A lot of those guys stuck around and saw this through, and they're benefiting from it. We talked about it earlier this week when Isaiah Coe decided to return to the Oklahoma Sooners, when Woody Washington decided to return. Having those experienced players be a part of your depth chart and stick around for as long as they possibly can only raises the ceiling of talent. And now we're seeing it because this past year, Dillon Gabriel was your starter. Your quarterback situation after Dillon Gabriel was not good. I mean, we don't know what Nick Evers is going to be. He might be a really good quarterback, but apparently he wasn't ready this year. And so you left yourself in a very vulnerable situation at quarterback. Now you go into this next year, you still got Dillon Gabriel coming. It looks a lot better because you have Jackson Arnold coming too. And you have Davis Bevel, who's going to have another year in Jeff Levy's system. You'd think that he'd kind of be your emergency third quarterback. If something were to happen to Dillon Gabriel, you go with the guy that's going to be the future, and you go with Jackson Arnold. The quarterback situation is much, much better. And like you said, I think he's a quarterback that is capable of winning Oklahoma a lot of games. Remember, this was a defense that allowed 30 points per game on the season. And that's after having a really good start to the season in non-conference play. The Big 12 slate did not bode well for the Oklahoma Sooners defense. So what does this team look like if the defense is able to improve just a little bit, or the offense is able to become a much more efficient third down offense or fourth down offense going into next year? If they can improve, the offense can improve just a little bit and the defense can improve just a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're a Big 12 title contender, but they're a better team if they're more efficient offensively on third downs in particular, or avoid them altogether, and the defense improves even just a little bit. We don't know if those two things will happen, but he's a quarterback that is capable of helping this team win games. Now, does he got to get some help around him? Sure, absolutely. Every quarterback needs help. It's very hard to find a quarterback in college, NFL, that can, quote unquote, carry a team. It takes a team to win football games. And the Oklahoma Sooners as a team weren't good enough this year. Dillon Gabriel is part of that, but he was one of the better parts of your team in 2022. So getting him back, allowing the offense to continue to build, that's a great thing for the Oklahoma Sooners. And I'm looking forward to seeing, okay, what can he do to improve upon what was, I think, a good year? Was it a great year, a Heisman Trophy contending year? No. Did it live up to the expectations that were set before him in the last 6 years? No. But I think you could argue it was as good as maybe a Spencer Rattler year. It was a good year. They put up a ton of points. Like when you're losing games because your defense is giving up 30 points, 35 points, 40 points a game, it's hard to argue that your quarterback was bad. Could you, and I think this is the problem with social media in this day and age, is that every throw gets amplified. Every single throw, every miss, every drop, every overthrow, every poor decision, they all get amplified. So when your quarterback's completing 65% of his passes, people are going to talk a lot about the 35% that he missed, which is kind of silly, but that's just the way of the world now. And so when we get misses, again, it's amplified. But again, good quarterback, good for Oklahoma that he's back. And now we kind of wait to see what other players might come back, Josh.
Or in the case of one Dillon Gabriel, the 37.3% of his passes that he missed in 2022. I mean, he was completing about 63% of his passes, 62.7%. Threw for 3,168 yards, 25 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions this season for Oklahoma. So as many things as maybe at times folks griped about, a lot of the numbers were really good for Dillon Gabriel. Run down just some of the overall offensive numbers for the Sooners, John. And this is where I think you get into yes, things can improve. And if Dillon Gabriel improves just a little bit, and if Oklahoma improves just a little bit, and you combine it with, obviously, they need some serious defensive growth. That much is obvious. But just talking specifically the offensive side of the football, John, this was the number 14th ranked total offense in all of college football. Oklahoma was, okay? They were the 32nd scoring offense. So not really the same territory that Oklahoma's typically been. They lacked some maybe explosion here and there. But these next two stats, really, I'm going to share with you, are a big part of why you have that number 32 in the scoring department, okay? 50th nationally, third down conversion offense. Oklahoma, obviously, that's the big one, right? That's where this group can clearly improve a bunch. That's where Dillon Gabriel individually, where dime time can improve a bunch. And I think some of those inaccuracies that upset some folks, right? That 37.3 that people aren't real happy about, unfortunately, it did come at some inopportune junctures, right? Some important junctures on third down. So that's an area that you earmark. It's just simply the play calling, the execution, all of that's got to be better. And then listen to this number, 66th in red zone offense nationally for Oklahoma. So 14th total offense, 32nd scoring offense, and then these back two statistics here, not good enough. 50th third down offense, 66th red zone. So that's some of the areas where Gabriel and Oklahoma, John, they've got to improve. And I believe that's there for Dillon Gabriel to improve, because I look at the situation like this. You had somebody who, oh, by the way, was coming off an injury. I think that's been forgotten. A lot of the times we have some of these conversations. So hopefully, right, he'll be fully healthy going into next season. I'm not saying that he had a ton of injury concerns this year, but in terms of being fully up to speed, coming out of the spring, coming out of the summer, there hopefully won't be any hiccups, knock on wood, for Dillon Gabriel going into 2023. So that's one advantage going in. And, oh, by the way, it's now going to be his second season of Power 5 football, which that as much experience and as many snaps as Dillon Gabriel had coming in, right? Remember, we talked so much about he's thrown for 7,000 plus passing yards and what was it, 60 some odd, 70 touchdowns, whatever it was. And, oh, by the way, none of those were Power 5 snaps, right? So now he's got that season under his belt, John. There's obvious room for improvement, areas that he could be better. I think this is huge news. I think that Gabriel can have a better season than 2022. I truly believe that.
And if Oklahoma wants to improve, the numbers you mentioned there, red zone offense in particular, like that one's the one that is most glaring, because you're giving away points by not scoring touchdowns when you get into the red zone. And some of that is the offensive line run blocking ability. Some of that is just being able to throw the ball in the red zone. Some of it is, like you mentioned, execution. They'd get down into the red zone and they'd have some dumb false start penalty, or there'd be a holding call, or there'd be an offensive lineman too far down the field and it'd be an illegal offensive lineman down the field. Those little things, they add up and they kill drives and they take points off the board. And as a team, Oklahoma's got to get better. Dillon Gabriel's got to be better in those situations too. One thing that it'll be really interesting to watch going into 2023, if Marvin Mims does indeed go off to the NFL, which I think he will, how much are they going to be able to improve their offense? Because they were very reliant on the deep ball for big plays in some games. Like, they were hitting a lot of big plays. That Texas Tech game, they were hitting a lot of big plays in that first half when Marvin Mims was just lighting up the Red Raiders. They took Marvin Mims out of the game in the second half, and the offense kind of struggled at different points. I mean, they still put up a lot of points, but late in the game when you had to have a touchdown, it was harder to come by. So does a guy like Jalil Farouk, whose game is more suited for the intermediate passing game, does that mean he's going to have more of a breakout season? Because if Mims is gone, I think Jalil Farouk's kind of your wide receiver one, the guy that's going to get more of the targets in the passing game. Is Austin Stogner helping your red zone offense? I mean, Braden Willis had a good season, but still they were 66th in red zone offense. Javonte Barnes getting more of a heavier workload, getting more red zone opportunities. Maybe that helps. And then a guy that, we're going to talk about next. You're adding to your offensive line depth. You're adding to your guard rotation competition. Potentially your offensive line, if they can take a step and improve down in the red zone, improve some of the mental mistakes, but also just the effectiveness, potentially that helps too. So again, not to sell Dillon Gabriel short, not to sell the offense short. There are things that he needs to work on. He needs to get better at, but what's your option if Dillon Gabriel doesn't come back? Like, where are you going at quarterback? And the easy answer is Jackson Arnold, but are you ready to throw a true freshman out there? Because we saw Caleb Williams with some really high highs against TCU, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State first half. And then we saw some low lows with Caleb Williams as a true freshman, Iowa State, Baylor, second half against Oklahoma State. So that's kind of par for the course when you have a true freshman at quarterback. So coming up next, we're going to talk Dillon Gabriel all offseason. We're looking forward to him being back. Welcome back, Dime Time. We're looking forward to seeing who your new deep threat's going to be. If Mims is gone, who's going to be the guy that benefits the most from you being able to throw the deep ball. And that's an area, I mean, he and Mims, they missed a couple times where Mims was wide open, but we're going to talk about Caleb Shaffer, who the Oklahoma Sooners got in the transfer portal coming up after I talk to you about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. 100% covered in chocolate. Fantastic. Tastes great. Has only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. You heard that right. 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein, only 130 calories. Great flavors like my personal favorite, the peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, mint brownie as well. So many really great tasting options. And even great tasting textures. Like you can get the original Built bar, or you can go with the Built Puff, or you can go with the Built granola bar. So many different options for you to consume. You can get the cookies and cream, double chocolate. Again, I've been eating Built Bar now for like 2.5 years. It's so good. My wife and I, we love them. The kids, I got to keep the kids out of them. My daughter, she loves them. And I'm like, hey, that's probably way too much protein for a 6-year-old. You're going to come out looking like China from the WWE. But Built Bar, go to built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15. You can get 15% off your next order over at built.com using promo code LOCK15 for the best tasting protein bar ever. All right, Josh. Caleb Shaffer in the transfer portal, offensive guard, 2,200 snaps for the Miami of Ohio Redhawks, playing left guard, 35 starts under his belt, added to the guard rotation, the third guard that Bill Bedenbaugh has landed in the last 4 years. That's pretty heady. Now, again, group of 5 competition. We just talked about Dillon Gabriel making the jump from group of 5 to power 5. A guy that, you look at Pro Football Focus grades, which offensive line grading isn't always great, but never really ranked highly with Miami of Ohio's, highest graded offensive players. But again, take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because their grades of offensive linemen aren't necessarily the most reliable, I guess. They do a really good job in some other areas, but offensive line grading is an area where they could struggle. I like the addition. I like that they added competition to the offensive line room. Potentially, this is a guy that comes in and starts for you at left guard or right guard. Maybe you move McKay Matire over to right guard. I think he was a right guard at Cal before coming to Oklahoma and flipping to left guard, because Chris Murray was the right guard. So I think maybe you move McKay Matire back over to right guard. You got Schaffer over at left guard. I like the addition. Again, trust Bill Bedenbaugh and his evaluations and his ability to develop offensive linemen. I think it's going to be really good to have a veteran presence, a part of that guard rotation, or just a guy that can step in and start right away for you.
Huge. Obviously, all sorts of starting experience under his belt, which I don't know how many times, broken record. Transfer portal season rolls on, ladies and gentlemen. We've had plenty of transfer portal season to talk about, which is exciting, right? This is what I've spent a bunch of time, John, here mentioning, which is if you can just fully dive into the deep end of the pool, it's actually kind of fun, right? You get to take these chances, and the retooling of the roster is, I know from a coach's standpoint, John, it's got to be maddening, right? As much roster construction constantly as you have to be involved in. But from a fan's perspective, it's like shiny new Christmas toys all the time this time of year. And so here's the latest in Caleb Shaffer, graduate transfer, Miami, Ohio. As you mentioned, all sorts of starts under his belt. Just the last 2 seasons, 25 starts under the belt, and actually had started each of the previous couple of seasons before that. All Mid-American Conference honors last season. So that's a great sign. And then just the size, 6'5", 333. Sounds like a Big 12 type size to me, right? Sounds like Oklahoma size to me. Here's an interesting note on this. Did you see this? Do you know who his coach was at Miami?
No.
Former Oklahoma offensive line coach James Patton.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
So just sort of a weird little wrinkle there. But obviously, again, Oklahoma has needed some offensive line help. They've gotten more offensive line help here with all the starters that, look, you're going to be replacing going into this next season. It's nice that the transfer portal, it does this for you, John. And we've seen Oklahoma, as you laid out right there, in recent years. Bill Bedenbaugh, he's kind of made some of his money out of some transfers into Oklahoma. That's not to say that even a Joshua Bates, right, couldn't step right in and be a difference maker. Our man from way out west as well, I think he's got a chance as well to be, if not a day one difference maker, to not be too far off. Caden Green, I think, got a chance to be maybe an instant impact kind of guy, right? So that's not to say that you're ignoring in any way, shape, or form the 22 signing class, the 23 signing class, the 24 signing class as we go forward. But again, the beautiful thing about the transfer portal is it creates some opportunities, John, for you to take some chances. And why not take a chance on somebody like Schaefer, who's got 25 starts the last 2 seasons.
Well, it's just like the NFL, right? You're going to draft, and you're drafting guys that you hope are going to be, starters for you, either their rookie season or, down the road as part of their rookie contract. You got to explore every avenue of talent acquisition. Teams that do well in the NFL, they draft well, they acquire players in free agency well. And the same is true for college football now. You've got to be able to recruit well, and you also have to be able to take shots in the transfer portal and end up with, difference makers. They did that with Deshaun McCullough, Jacob Lacey out of Notre Dame, Austin Stogner out of South Carolina, Reggie Pearson out of Texas Tech. And now you're getting Caleb Shaffer out of Miami of Ohio, a guy with a lot of experience. That's huge. Like, you're adding guys with talent, you're adding guys with experience. And we talk about it all the time. You're raising the talent level for each position group every time you do that. Adding that experience matters. Having guys with a lot of snaps under the belt, it helps everybody because it provides just more insight into how to play the position, provides more, again, the solid floor. If somebody like Caden Green comes in and just dominates from day one and just wows everybody, and you just feel like we can't keep this kid off the field, well, at worst, you have a really good backup in Schaefer that could take over if something were to happen to Matire or something were to happen to, Caden Green, God forbid. That's true across the board. Say Peyton Bowen comes in and just steals the show at safety. Well, at the worst, you've got a really solid floor in Reggie Pearson if you need to play matchup games, something like that. So again, love the addition, love being able to bring in a guy with such veteran experience. And Bill Bedenbaugh is rarely wrong along the offensive line. Chris Murray was a good addition for the Oklahoma Sooners. McKay Matire in year one was a good one. We're going to get another year of him. Wanye Morris. Year one didn't go so great for Wanye Morris, but year two was really good. Tyler Guyton. Tyler Guyton didn't play. He started some games for you his first year with the Sooners in 2022, but now you're looking to rely upon him in 2023 to be your starting right tackle. So he does a really good job evaluating players in the transfer portal and adding difference makers.
I myself, John, at times have been guilty of this, whether it's signees, now that we're entering this new age of college football, the transfer portal, of honestly being a little stuck up in some regards, right? To where it's not a 4-star guy. It's not a 5-star guy. And I think we fall into this trap a little bit with maybe somebody like Caleb Shaffer here. Now, while some of the other offensive line names that we've mentioned, right? Wanye Morris, guess what? Comes from Tennessee. McKade Matire comes from out west, right? Cal. Who's my man here? Chris Murray's from UCLA, right? So all Power 5 acquisitions. The reason I bring this up is I saw, and I love all of the comments we get on YouTube. Appreciate everybody interacting with the show. I was combing through some of your comments before we started taping the show tonight. Somebody was upset with Devon Sears that Oklahoma would be looking at him because of the Texas State factor, right? And look at the limited production. And to that, I say, okay, I understand the complaint and I get it. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying let's let some of these things play out. First of all, obviously for Sears, he hasn't committed. He's not signed with Oklahoma. He's not enrolled with Oklahoma. I just say this in regards to Schaefer as well. Sometimes we get a little caught up with it's a group of 5 guy, or it's a 4-star, it's a 5-star guy. Keep in mind that, as you said, John, Bill Bedenbaugh's got a pretty good track record of watching tape for somebody that's played college football, right? And the coaches that he talks to, that he's networked really, really well. So if he's hearing certain things that he likes, probably there's a reason that he's very interested in Caleb Shaffer. So I would just encourage people to keep that in mind when you start thinking like, man, it's not a Power 5 guy, or it's not this guy or that guy. Trust the staff, I guess is what I'm getting at. Until we find out, right? Hey, a year, 2 years from now, we get down the road and you come back and point to me to this show and say, Josh Helmer, But until we get to that point, give this thing a little bit of leeway and grace.
Exactly. Because, Bill Bedenbaugh, again, has a really good track record in his time with the Oklahoma Sooners at finding really good players and getting them to the NFL. That's why you're getting these transfer portal, guys that are interested in Oklahoma, because they've got a good track record of development. And I think, Caleb Shaffer has a chance to be another one of those kind of, diamond in the rough type players. Right. And you talk about the recruiting thing, and that's why I really love the signings of Ashton Sanders and Taylor Wayne. Like, those two are the guys I'm probably most excited to watch in this recruiting class, because I feel like they are the ones that have the best chance to outperform their star status. I mean, they're 3-star guys are not going to have the same expectations that, Adibare and Peyton Bowen and Jackson Arnold are going to have. And so they've got to do something really special to live up to that 5-star status. Well, these other guys, Ashton Sanders, Taylor Wayne, they've got the traits, they've got the athleticism, but maybe just kind of fell under the radar a little bit and have a chance, I feel like, to be really great players for Oklahoma. I think this could be another one, like Caleb Shaffer. He might not have been the most highly sought after offensive guard in college football in the transfer portal, but Bill Beatonbow thinks there's something to this guy. We think Bill Beatonbow is a pretty good offensive line coach. We think he's a pretty good talent evaluator. So let's roll with it.
I think the staff, John, what we're seeing, and I do think Bill Beatonbow is a good talent evaluator. I will trust his judgment over you and I and most everybody else's judgment for the most part, right? I do think that we're seeing that this staff with, say, the McCarty signee, the Sanders signee, even dating back, I know this is someone that exits via the transfer portal, Alton Tarber. I mean, there's some names that I don't think it's just, hey, it's late in the process, so let's sign Tarber. I think that this staff definitely fancies themselves, and Britt's talked a lot about this in the past, John, but they fancy themselves developers of talent, right? Look, I'm not saying don't get blue chip talent. Obviously, go get the 4- and 5-star talent. You need that too. But I do also believe in, the opposite end of the spectrum as well, John, that to win national championships, to be consistent, there's going to have to be a player or two, and especially at least early to get this thing jump-started in the Venables era. I think it's okay to have a couple of developmental pieces, and I trust this staff to find some of those guys.
Yeah, you got to find some steals. And the same thing is true in the NFL. You got to find those 5th-round picks, 6th-round picks that can become starters for you that nobody expects to be. That's where you got to really, like, you look at the Seattle Seahawks defense. Yeah, they had the Earl Thomas. Yeah, they had Bobby Wagner that were, premium picks, but then it was like the Richard Sherman, or I'm blanking on the other cornerback's name from that defense, but they found guys later in that draft that I think it was the 2012 draft, maybe, that became stars for them, but they weren't, top 100 picks. Same is true for recruiting. Yes, everybody's going to be going after the top 100 guys in the country. Can you find the guys that are under-recruited, under-evaluated, and turn them into guys that could be potential stars for you? So last guy we got to talk about, another one that could be a potential star for the Oklahoma Sooners if they're able to land him. This is Rondell Bothroyd, visiting the Oklahoma Sooners this week on Thursday, as we're recording Thursday night. He was in Norman on Thursday. This is a very intriguing player to watch because listed as a defensive lineman, probably more of a edge player or a three-man alignment defensive end, but potentially comes to Oklahoma with a lot of production. I mean, he's played 5 years at Wake. He redshirted his freshman year. From what I can tell from College Football Reference, probably got a medical redshirt his sophomore year in 2020, but in 2021, it's 7 sacks, 16.5 tackles for loss, 63 tackles. 63. That's crazy production. In 2022, he had 6 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 30 total tackles. I'm guessing the drop in production is probably because ACC teams decided we cannot let this guy beat us anymore. We can't let him rack up 16.5 tackles for loss. We got to pay a little bit more closer attention to him. So I'm really intrigued by this prospect and potentially his addition to the Oklahoma Sooners.
Well, and again, another example, John, I think of this staff. They're not waiting around, right? They want an immediate infusion of defensive talent, and they want it now. And one of the names I see on the YouTube comment page out there, before we forget a name out there tonight, Trace Ford. Yes, they've added Trace Ford as well from the transfer portal as well. I think that's one name we forgot to mention earlier. So all of which is to say all these different names that we're talking about, John, and especially, defensively, like you think about this gentleman from Wake Forest, they understand what the total defense looked like, right? They understand rush defense, pass defense. None of it was good. Scoring defense, not good. They need help. They need it now, and they need proven production. They can't wait and take gambles in 2023 on somebody that signed in 22 or somebody that signed in 23. Hopefully, we're talking about several of those signees, John, stepping right in and being potential stars for Oklahoma. The ratings next to the name indicate that could be a possibility for some of these guys for Oklahoma, but OU can't take that chance in 2023, right? Because 6 and 7, not good enough, not acceptable at the University of Oklahoma. And I think this staff understands that they're going to try and turn over every rock to get talent into Norman, to get it here now.
Yeah, they don't have time to be patient. They really don't. And I like some of the guys that are on this roster that are carrying over from 2022 to 2023. But again, it's a 6 and 7 team that had a really bad defense. So you can't necessarily just like hope these guys are going to develop and be like, yes, we're going to improve just because it's another year. I do think Danny Stutzman gets better. I do think Ethan Downs gets better. As Isaiah Coe, I think he gets better. Woody Washington, hopefully has an improved season. I don't know how much more he can improve, but again, hopefully it's just everybody gets a little bit better. And then you add this infusion of talent with guys like, hopefully a guy like Bothroyd. You got Pearson. You added Deshaun McCullough. You added Jacob Lacey in the transfer portal, Trace Ford in the transfer portal. So, I mean, if you continue to stack talent, add as much talent as possible, then it should raise the game for everybody. Like competition should breed that improvement a little bit. Again, another guy that if they can add him, I mean, they're adding some serious production to their defensive end or, outside linebacker rotation. So very intriguing prospect. It'll be interesting to see what they do there. Josh, anything else you need to touch on? You feel like we need to touch on before we get out of here tonight?
Man, it would be, it'd be a huge addition if they win this recruitment out of Wake Forest. Just the 14 sacks alone over the past 2 seasons. That's something that this OU team we found out was desperately lacking, right? The ability to get to, rush the passer. Speaking of the YouTube commenters, somebody said, yeah, Ethan Downs, he got into the backfield, but he's not getting anybody down, right? Okay, well, this is somebody that, guess what, got to the quarterback and had a knack 14 times the last 2 years of getting the quarterback down. So Oklahoma needs that. This would be gigantic for this staff, for this team, for this program to win this recruiting war. They have won some of these, especially defensively, throughout this transfer portal cycle. Let's hope that in the not too distant future, we're talking about another win right here.
Yeah, and if they add him, I feel a lot better at Deshaun McCullough potentially playing cheetah for you, because then you're adding another proven pass rusher to your rotation with Ethan Downs and R. Mason Thomas that you feel like, and PJ Adebawore, that you feel like, okay, we've got a guy that can get after the quarterback, can rush the passer, can win, and then we're developing Ethan Downs, we're developing R. Mason Thomas, we're developing PJ Adebawore, and we feel really good about those 4 off the edge. So now Marvin Mims' watch begins with Dillon Gabriel's status answered. Now we keep an eye out on what Marvin Mims is going to do. We'll cover that as it happens for you here on the Locked On Sooners podcast. Again, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Hit the notification bell over there to let you know when new episodes drop, and hit a like button as well. Go leave us a 5-star rating over on Apple. We'd appreciate it. It helps more people find out about the show. And until next time, we'll be back for our live show on Monday. So if you enjoy that, be there for that. We're looking forward to it, being there with you and interacting as we cover the Oklahoma Sooners recruiting transfer portal. I mean, we're less than a month now from National Signing Day. We'll see what cards Brent Venables and his staff have up their sleeve to potentially surprise us on National Signing Day. Remember, R. Mason Thomas and Grayson Halton were late flips for the Sooners in the final few weeks towards National Signing Day. So that'll be interesting to follow. But until next time, he's Josh Helmer. Go check him out on 94.7 The Ref in Norman, 9 to noon, Monday through Friday. I'm John Williams. You can read my work over at thesoonerswire.com. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sooners and on Facebook, Locked On Sooners Podcast. We'll catch you then. Boomer Sooner.